everyone, Phobos here, coming out with another build guide, and this time it's for the Magic Finding Freezing Pulse Inquisitor build. I already made a bunch of videos for Freezing Pulse totem builds, but this one's a little bit different because what I ended up doing was, this was probably the second character I leveled in the league, because I always just like having one of these because it's very fun to play, in my opinion, the Totem Freezing Pulse playstyle. So I leveled the Inquisitor one this league, and I got it to like 92 or something. And then I was mostly just playing on my Cascader and my other support build with my cousin. So I didn't play this as much, and I decided ultimately to get in on the Magic Find craze and kind of go into Magic Find with this, so I converted over to an MF character. Now, what I wanted to do is I wanted to see if you could do like a cheap version of MF that's like effective, because a lot of versions recommend Biscos and like double venters and stuff like that, and getting decent rolls on double venters and obviously getting a Biscos is super expensive. Ironically, I ended up finding a Biscos with this build, but I ended up just selling it because I'm not really sure how frequently I'm going to be playing, especially because I'm splitting my time between two leagues. I'm doing some stuff on softcore, working on some builds there just because they'd be easier to test on softcore, and then I'm still playing hardcore, but the time is going to be split, so the amount of use I'm going to get out of a Biscos is questionable, and if I die with it, I'll be super salty. So I ended up just selling it for like 21x. So yeah, things are going pretty good. But anyways, this is like the cheap version, and I'll explain to you what my setup is, how I got the items. So the actual build itself, I guess I'll go over that first, doesn't really change. The main thing you want here is placement speed, because totem placement speed just makes the totems feel so good. For some reason I don't have shield charge. Oh, it's because, there we go, yeah. Okay, so as you can see, we move pretty fast with shield charge, and then the placement speed just feels amazing. And you have a lot of it. And that's basically this cluster right here. And typically when I get this cluster, especially if my build is going to be tight on resistances like this one is because it's an MF build, I like to come over here and I just grab Sentinel, which is 10 to all. These two are 18, and then you get a jewel socket. And if you really need to, you can pop up and grab the fire res too. So that's a pretty good cluster of nodes. And you also get res from this and this, and you can get res from this if you need to. So you can get a decent amount of res from the tree. But yeah, other than making sure you get placement speed with this version, there's not really any difference from this and the other versions. You don't go for power charges, you pretty much get the health and the mana, you get mind over matter, you get crit multi. If I was going to finish this up, I'd probably go down to Doomcast right here, but I'd say Doomcast is the one that you need least. And yeah, I just got some jewels in here. This isn't really optimized or anything, but obviously you want your clear mind. You can also just keep putting points in the life wheel as well, but honestly, for the type of content we're doing, you really don't need a ton of life, because I mostly keep this guy in low-level maps. That is the recommendation that I would say, is that you probably want to keep this in white maps. You obviously can do up to red maps with this, but if you're going to be doing like abysses and stuff, especially I would say, you have to be really careful in yellow and red maps, because things just hit really fucking hard, and you really want to make sure you keep your basalt up. And I think the most important way to play it is you want to like get on top of the hole that the abyss monsters come out of immediately, and set your totems up right away, because you need to freeze dangerous mobs very quickly to give yourself like the maximum chance to survive. And yeah, it's just a little bit sketchy, because if you do end up getting hit by something really that's like really nasty, you could very well just die instantly, right? Because you only have like 4k life, 500 energy shield, and like 1400 mana. And at this point, because you only have 4k life, your mana isn't even really like, you don't even get to use all of that mana necessarily. So yeah, it's like, it's kind of sketch. Abyss monsters, even in low maps, can be sketch, but the odds of you dying just go down a lot. So there's that. Just a note about survivability. And then, like I said, the rest of the build is pretty much the same damage-wise. The flasks are pretty much the same, except we squeeze in, I think I had a granite in its place, squeeze in a divination distillate. This flask is not really amazing because sometimes it's difficult to keep up because your mana actually likes to stay kind of topped with this build unless you've taken a hit recently. Sometimes what I'll do is when I start the map, I'll spam a bunch of totems down to dip into the mana a bit. Then as I get going, it'll be regenning, right? But it like won't really be regenning super fast, so you still have a lot of time where you're basically on the flask, and then you'll most likely take a hit at some point that'll reduce your mana again. So you can keep it up throughout a map pretty consistently for the most part, but there are just going to be some times where it's not going to be up because, you know, you're just freezing everything and not really taking damage. And if you were to actually spam your totems, you're sort of like losing clear speed. So there's a bit of a trade-off there. It's not the best flask. One thing I tried to do is I tried to use that jewel that makes your mana costs like double or something. And you get like 30% more spell damage. Now the problem here is that it's like that's too much mana at that point. There's other things you can probably do, like take that jewel and then take a bunch of reduced nodes, but I want to say like the sweet spot is probably about like 130, 120 mana costs, or maybe like 110 or something. But when you take the other node, it literally doubles it, so you go to like 160, and then you kind of just lose a ton of your defense because you don't have mind over matter, right? Because your mana is pretty much always gone. So yeah, probably not the best idea unless you're sticking to like really low level stuff, obviously. But yeah, there's different things you can mess around with like that. You can also use the gloves, but if you use the gloves, you're giving up Sedimas, so that's like one of your quantity rolls. Well, I didn't realize how bad the quantity on this was. I should probably replace these. But anyways, so in terms of the setup, right? The core of this build is actually going to be the aesthetic, and it's basically used as like a budget Biscos. This one has a pretty good rarity roll, a decent quantity roll. I think it goes from 10 to 15 quantity and 80 to 100 rarity. Now the nice thing about this versus Biscos is that this applies to every monster that you're attacking. So even though the values don't seem quite as out of control, you have to keep in mind that Biscos is limited to certain mob types, right? And I believe like somebody on Reddit said it comes out to about like 15 quantity in terms of the quantity, like the overall quantity. So you're not really missing much from Biscos alone. I think the caveat to that is that if you're doing a map with a bunch of sextants and you're doing like breach and stuff, then you're increasing the amount of normal monsters by a lot. So there's obviously things you can do to like tilt the MF advantage in favor of your Biscos, where you're going to get a lot more out of that setup than this. And Biscos is still the better amulet because it doesn't have any of the drawbacks that this amulet has, which means you can use more magic find gear. So I'm in no way claiming that this is a better setup, but this is just a vastly cheaper setup. And it's something I think that new players may want to consider because a lot of new players, you know, for the first couple leagues that Biscos was out, they never even really paid attention to it. And then it was like, you know, streamers started making a big deal about Biscos, and everybody wanted a Biscos. And prior to the change where they made it so it was tier 1, you know, you could get a Biscos for like probably like 80 chaos, and I'd say that was a really good investment because you would probably, even like a casual player would probably definitely make that back. But nowadays the problem is that like it costs so much. Like I said, it costs, like I sold mine for like 21 exalts. Probably could have got more for it if I waited even longer. That's a huge investment, and you have to think of it like you eventually have to make that back by playing a ton, right? So like you have to play with the Biscos on, and then if you're playing hardcore and you actually die with it, it just feels terrible now. So whereas like dying with like a 50 to 80 chaos item doesn't feel nearly as bad. So yeah, I just say like unless you really know what you're doing, I'd be wary of like actually going the Biscos route because you need to play a lot and you need to play efficiently to really make it worth it. And I know that efficiency doesn't always line up with fun, and a lot of people play this game for varying reasons. So just be careful if you end up going the Bisco's route. But this is a nice alternative. And how we do the setup right here is I have a chest that I rolled with, what do you call it? Just like got a random 6-link and rolled it. And then you could also do stuff like, you could get like the Elder chest, put a 5-link in it. And then I think you can you can get like a 5-link that gives rarity and then has like the item rarity gem. You can do something like that. This build doesn't really need a 6-link, especially if you're in low level maps. But then I have a white 2-stone here for the 90% rarity, because it's kind of like, that is a substantial amount of rarity. And like in some sense we're really wearing the amulet for the quantity, but the rarity definitely helps out, and it can help you get you some good unique items. So I don't like to pass it up, especially when you don't really need to wear a ring that's anything more than white really for this build. So white ring, and then blue ring right here. And obviously the resist values are just going to depend on what you have, you know, like what you need for resistances. I do have a pretty good shield here, but you can make up for a lot of res and stuff on jewels. As you can see, I had like a tri-damage jewel in there. You could do like a dual res jewel. You don't need tri-damage jewel, because the build isn't about stacking damage jewels. There's only like 1 damage jewel in here. So for the belts, you want to do probably Bisco's leash, because it gives you rampage, which is good. It gives you 5 quantity, which is only like 3 less than the other one, which I forget the name of it right now. And it gives you 1% rarity per 15 rampage kills. You can easily clear a map, you know, with like 600 rampage % by the end. So the rarity actually does kind of get somewhat significant. And yeah, so overall this is just the better belt in my opinion. It also gives a nice chunk of cold res and some strength. So can never go wrong with those stats. Sedima's probably get a better roll than this. You can get Sedima's relatively cheap. You can get like a 15 roll pretty cheap, probably 1 chaos. I think I just have these because of the colors. I'm not really sure why mine are so bad, but whatever. Obviously these are going to be your quantity, for your quantity. And then the gold rims can actually be sort of expensive, but if you get like a pair of like 15% or something, they're not too bad. If you try and get like 18%, they're going to cost you probably 20 chaos or something. 10 movement speed is annoying, but with the way shield charge functions, it's not really a big deal at all, and you're more concerned with the attack speed. The weapon, just make sure you have a decent amount of attack speed. This one has cast speed and added lightning damage and just spell damage. Not really that great of a scepter, to be honest. You can get much better. The helm is sort of good, and just in the sense that it has a lot of life. And you get 20% prod speed. Now, the prod speed is something I really wanted to talk about. So, if you want to do freeze pulse with this build, I do recommend trying to get a helm that has a prod speed. I think the 30% Uberlab enchant is kind of rough, because it costs like, I think 40 chaos or something, especially early in the league. But you can get the merciless one pretty cheap usually, and you pretty much just want like some amount of prod speed on this in addition to the gem prod speed, because otherwise it feels sort of bad. You can actually sort of tell that the prod speed on this is like a lot worse than the normal version of the build, where you'd be running like a Winds of Change and stuff, and maybe a career reward. But it's not like so bad where it's unusable, especially because it's in low level maps anyway, so you don't really need the damage fall off to be like super far. So this setup pretty much works, but if I didn't have a prod speed helm, I would be very tempted to just make this into a Frostbolt version. There are probably going to be some people that are going to argue that Frostbolt is just way better in general for this type of thing. And I could definitely see some merit to that. So you can do this with Freezing Pulse or Frostbolt. It doesn't really matter. It's kind of like whatever your preference is. But currently I'm doing it with Freezing Pulse and I enjoy it. So in terms of the actual links, it's Freezing Pulse, Spell Totem, Controlled Destruction, Crit Strikes, Added Cold, Faster Casting. Crit Strikes, like you could always, I think it actually is probably BIS, but like theoretically, if you put like Hypo in, that's probably better. But obviously the reason why people run Crit Strikes is because, in most cases, because not only is it pretty good damage still, right? But it also just makes your crit higher, obviously, so you freeze more often, so things just feel safer. So that's what I like about crit strikes personally, and that's why I keep it in there. So yeah, and then the weapon swap is nothing special, it's just like to level gems and stuff like that. So that's pretty much the build. I have a Vol Haste in there, obviously, and a Vol Lightning Trap just for bosses, or just to help get through the map quicker. I don't know what the Enfeeble is on. Oh, I think it's just like a casted Enfeeble. You can put like a better curse on here, because like you're not really going to need an Enfeeble. I probably just didn't change that part on the setup. Like, Proj Weakness is probably the best curse you can use for Inquis. You can just toss a Proj Weakness in there, and you'll be good to go. Shield Charge, obviously, for the movement speed. I use Lightning Golem just for the cast speed, and then obviously the attack speed. It's a really nice golem for any type of build like this. And yeah, it's pretty fun. You definitely notice the difference running with quantity as opposed to not having it, and you notice the rarity as well from the belt and the aesthetic. I think the aesthetic, like, some of them can get kind of expensive, like 15C, but for the most part, they're not really that bad. So it's definitely a good budget option for MF. And yeah, the only thing is you're not really able to run any rings or anything like that, which isn't really a huge deal, because typically you would have to run Venters really to make it worth it, and Venters are going to severely, like, if you get a bad pair, right, they're just going to severely handicap your res. It's going to make things like a huge pain in the ass, and if you get a good pair, they're going to be expensive, so it kind of defeats the budget version. So yeah. You could run like Venters if you wanted, especially if you don't care about the rarity from the neck, or you could also just, like, if you got like enough res from other places, if you had like insane gear, you could just probably like make the helm or something white, or the chest white, you know, stuff like that. So there are ways you can like incorporate Venters into this while still using the amulet, but I think it just becomes a pain in the ass. This is like very cheap, very effective, very safe, very easy to set up, and that's why I'm making the video. Obviously you can take it a little bit further, but I feel like at that point the investment doesn't become worth it. But the, like, what you get in return for this versus gearing it is great, you know what I mean? And like I said, it even works fine in a 5-link, so don't worry about that. And on a 6-link you could even put in the rarity gem if you wanted, so there's just tons of options you can go for here. But I keep it like this because I just find the clear speed is a little bit better, and I'm mostly concerned about the quantity. So thank you guys for watching, and this is like basically another thing that I've been doing. So I've been playing this build and the support build, and then I'm also playing trying to get like a tanky bow build tornado shot character, and I leveled it up in standard, and I've been playing that. So if you turn on the stream, you're probably going to be seeing me play that for the next few days. It's going pretty well. I'll make a video about that soon. Basically, it's like Iron Reflex's armor, and it's pretty fun. Can't wait to talk to you guys about that one. And then I have another kind of unique build in the pipeline, and then after that we'll see exactly what we'll be doing. Been playing some other games as well, so you'll see some other videos pop up on the channel, but gonna try and get a bunch of PoE content back out there, and also gonna upload some of the runs from the support build to just show how janky it is. So yeah, thanks for checking the video out. If you liked it, give it a like, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you like the content. Thanks a ton. See you guys next time. Oops.